They were once the faces of Hollywood's golden age, beloved, admired, and worshipped on silver screens across the world. Their names echoed through the grand theaters of Los Angeles and Paris. Their faces adorned movie posters that defined an era. But the world is fickle. Fame fades, and some lights go out in silence. Behind every dazzling smile was a shadow they never escaped. When the applause died down, they were left with empty rooms, haunted memories, and a world that no longer remembered their names. Today, we uncover the chilling truth behind the glitter. This is not just about forgotten actors. It's about how the very machine that created legends also abandoned them. These are the golden age stars who died in poverty and were erased from memory. 1. Marie Prevost. In the silent film era, Marie Prevost was pure dynamite. With a sparkling screen presence and comedic timing that made audiences laugh out loud, she starred in over 120 films throughout the 1920s. Her roles in The Marriage Circle and Three Women cemented her as one of Ernst Lubitsch's favorite muses. She had it all: beauty, fame, and a future that looked untouchable. But beneath the bubbly exterior was a woman battling despair. After her mother tragically died in a car accident, Marie spiraled. Alcohol became her crutch. Roles dried up with the arrival of talkies. The once glamorous star found herself cast aside, invisible in a city that once adored her. She took on humiliating roles as extras, uncredited and unnoticed, barely earning enough to eat. In 1937, she was found dead in a tiny Los Angeles apartment. Starved, alone, with no money to her name. For days, no one noticed she was gone. The studio system that built her fame had long forgotten her. A friend once said, "Marie died of broken dreams." But in truth, she died of Hollywood's indifference. 2. Bela Lugosi. He terrified a generation with a single stare. In 1931, Bela Lugosi redefined horror as Count Dracula, his chilling performance embedding him in cinematic history. His thick Hungarian accent, once seen as a hindrance, became iconic. For a brief, glorious moment, Lugosi was horror. But typecasting became his prison. Hollywood refused to see him beyond the Cape. While his peers found new opportunities, Bela was offered the same sinister roles: creatures, ghouls, addicts. Desperate for work, he accepted them all. The dignity of choice was stripped from him. He fell into morphine addiction, a dark refuge from relentless typecasting and financial strain. By the 1950s, Lugosi was making films with Ed Wood, cheap, bizarre productions far beneath his legacy. His health declined rapidly, and in 1956, he died of a heart attack in a modest Los Angeles apartment. He had less than $2,000 to his name. No Hollywood tribute, no star-studded farewell. He was buried in his Dracula cape. Some say it was his request. Others believe it was the only costume left that fit. A final line from one of his friends lingers: "He gave Hollywood his soul, and they left him with nothing but fangs." 3. Barbara Payton. She was once the definition of blonde bombshell, Barbara Payton, a seductive force who lit up the screen and kissed tomorrow goodbye opposite James Cagney. Her allure was magnetic, her confidence intoxicating. Hollywood declared her the next big star. For a moment, she had the world at her feet, but Barbara's descent was as fast as her rise. Behind the scenes, her life was a storm of reckless choices, toxic relationships, and addiction. She became tabloid fodder, a woman known more for scandals than screen roles. Alcohol consumed her. Studio doors that once opened without a knock slammed shut. By the 1960s, she was unrecognizable, drifting through cheap hotels in Hollywood, selling herself on Sunset Boulevard. Once photographed in mink and satin, she now wandered barefoot, bruised, and broken. She published a brutally honest memoir called I Am Not Ashamed, but it read more like a farewell than a redemption. In 1967, Barbara Payton died at just 39 from heart and liver failure. Alone, penniless, and forgotten by the same industry that once adored her. She was a candle that burned at both ends, a columnist wrote, and no one ever tried to shield her from the flame. 4. Bobby Driscoll. He was Disney's golden child. Bobby Driscoll became the voice and face of Peter Pan, winning an Academy Juvenile Award and capturing hearts in films like Song of the South and Treasure Island. The world adored him. But child stars grow up, and Hollywood, it seems, doesn't like to watch them do it. As he entered adolescence, Bobby's charm faded in the eyes of casting directors. Disney dropped him without warning. With no job and no guidance, he spiraled into drug use. Heroin became a constant companion. By his early 20s, the once innocent face of magic was a convicted felon, in and out of rehab and jail. In 1968, a body was found in an abandoned tenement building in New York. No ID. No one came looking. He was buried in a pauper's grave on Hart Island, unmarked, unclaimed. It took over a year for his identity to be discovered, and only because someone compared fingerprints posthumously. He died alone, forgotten, a ghost of childhood fame. A line from Peter Pan haunts his legacy. To die would be an awfully big adventure. For Bobby Driscoll, it wasn't an adventure. It was a tragic silence no one heard. Do you want to continue? 5. Veronica Lake. With her signature peekaboo hairstyle and icy femme fatale glare, Veronica Lake became an icon of 1940s film noir. Her performances in This Gun for Hire, The Blue Dahlia, and Sullivan's Travels made her a household name. She was mysterious, alluring, and undeniably unforgettable. But behind the sultry image was a woman at war, with herself, the studios, and the world. Veronica battled alcoholism from a young age. Her behavior on set became erratic. Directors and co-stars complained, and roles dwindled. Her marriage collapsed, her finances crumbled, and soon she was a star no one wanted to hire. By the 1960s, she was working as a waitress in a New York hotel bar. Some patrons recognized her. Most didn't believe it was really her. She later published a memoir and briefly returned to acting, but the damage was done. Hollywood had closed its doors. Veronica Lake died of hepatitis and kidney failure in 1973 at the age of 50. She was nearly destitute, cremated without ceremony. A former colleague once said, "She lived like a dream, but died like a rumor." 6. Rondo Hatton. He never sought fame, but Hollywood found him because of how he looked. Rondo Hatton, once a handsome young journalist and athlete, developed severe acromegaly in his 20s, a condition that distorted his facial features. Universal Studios, always hunting for new monsters, cast him in horror films like The Brute Man and House of Horrors. He never needed makeup. His face was the role. And for a brief moment, he was Hollywood's new terror. Quiet, towering, tragic. But behind the monstrous facade was a gentle soul. Rondo was said to be soft-spoken, deeply private, and even embarrassed by how the studios exploited his condition. The fame he earned was soaked in cruelty, and the few interviews he gave often hinted at a man who never fully accepted the way the world saw him. He died suddenly of a heart attack in 1946, at just 51, alone. No children, no major headlines. Hollywood quickly moved on to the next face of fear. Decades later, horror fans would name an award in his honor, the Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Award. But during his life, there were no trophies, only stares. He was never the monster, a co-star once whispered. The real monsters were in the audience. 7. Susan Cabot. A petite brunette with a fierce screen presence, Susan Cabot carved a niche in B-movie horror and westerns during the 1950s. Films like The Wasp Woman turned her into a cult icon, and her beauty masked a fragile, tormented soul. Behind the scenes, her life was far more haunting than any script she ever performed. Susan suffered deep emotional scars from childhood. Abandoned by her parents, shuffled through foster homes, she never found stability. Later, she was plagued by depression, abusive relationships, and chronic mental illness. After her brief Hollywood success, she retreated into seclusion, shut inside a small Los Angeles home with her only son, Timothy, who had his own developmental struggles. Then, in 1986, the headlines came. Susan Cabot was found beaten to death in her bedroom. Her son, just 22, had killed her during what he claimed was a psychotic episode. The house was described as nightmarish, hoarded items, locked rooms, decay. Hollywood had long forgotten her. At the time of her death, she hadn't acted in over 2 decades. No colleagues came forward. No tributes aired. Just a sad, grisly end to a woman who never truly escaped the shadows. She lived in silence, a reporter noted, and died in screams. 8. Jackie Kugan. Long before the Addams Family introduced him as Uncle Fester, Jackie Kugan was America's first child superstar. Discovered by Charlie Chaplin and immortalized in The Kid, 1921, Jackie was earning millions before he turned 10. He had toys from around the world, a personal chauffeur, and fame that stretched across continents. But none of it lasted. As he grew older, Hollywood grew colder. Roles disappeared. When Jackie turned 21 and tried to access his fortune, he discovered it was gone, lavishly spent by his mother and stepfather. He sued them, and the resulting scandal led to the creation of the Kugan Law, which finally protected child actors' earnings. But the damage to Jackie's life was irreversible. He spent years scraping by, serving in WWII, taking odd roles, doing stunt work. He returned to fame briefly in the 1960s as the ghoulish but lovable Uncle Fester, but it was a far cry from the child wonder he once was. He died in 1984 of heart failure, financially stable but never emotionally healed. His story became a cautionary tale for every young actor that followed. A critic once said, "Hollywood gave Jackie Kugan to the world and then taught the world how to forget him." Knob 9, El Brendell. In the early days of talkies, no comedic voice was more recognizable than El Brendell's exaggerated faux Swedish accent. Born to Irish and German parents in Philadelphia, he invented the bumbling Yumpin Yiminy persona that made him a box office draw in the 1930s. Films like Just Imagine and Mr. Lemon of Orange kept audiences laughing, and for a time, El Brendell was one of the highest-paid comedians in Hollywood. But his comedy aged poorly. As Hollywood evolved, El's routine became a relic. His accent, once charming, now felt outdated and offensive. He struggled to adapt. Studios stopped calling. By the 1940s, he was working as a straight man in small-time burlesque shows, clinging to a past that no longer wanted him. In his final years, he lived modestly out of the spotlight. When he died in 1964, his passing received almost no coverage, no retrospectives, no tributes, just a quiet end to a man who once had the country in stitches. His gravestone bears his real name, Elmer Goodfellow Brendell. The persona that brought him fame vanished long before he did. A fellow comic once said, "He made America laugh, then vanished before it could say thank you." 10. Frances Farmer wasn't just beautiful. She was brilliant, rebellious, and uncompromising. Her breakout roles in Come and Get It and Flowing Gold revealed a fiercely intelligent actress who refused to conform. She challenged the studio system, rejected publicity stunts, and refused to play the Hollywood game. But in the 1940s, a woman who spoke too loudly or thought too deeply was labeled difficult. Frances was branded unstable. A string of breakdowns, fueled by alcohol and frustration, led to her being institutionalized. For years, she was confined to psychiatric hospitals, subjected to rumored abuses, forced treatments, and total isolation. Though she eventually returned to the public eye with a brief television career, the damage was permanent. Frances never fully recovered, emotionally or professionally. Hollywood, once enamored by her defiance, turned its back completely. She died of esophageal cancer in 1970 at age 56 in near obscurity. Her story later inspired the 1982 film Frances, but even that couldn't undo decades of silence around her suffering. A journalist once wrote, "Frances wasn't crazy. She was awake in a world that demanded sleep." 10. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer wasn't just beautiful. She was brilliant, rebellious, and uncompromising. Her breakout roles in Come and Get It and Flowing Gold revealed a fiercely intelligent actress who refused to conform. She challenged the studio system, rejected publicity stunts, and refused to play the Hollywood game. But in the 1940s, a woman who spoke too loudly or thought too deeply was labeled difficult. Frances was branded unstable. A string of breakdowns, fueled by alcohol and frustration, led to her being institutionalized. For years, she was confined to psychiatric hospitals, subjected to rumored abuses, forced treatments, and total isolation. Though she eventually returned to the public eye with a brief television career, the damage was permanent. Frances never fully recovered, emotionally or professionally. Hollywood, once enamored by her defiance, turned its back completely. She died of esophageal cancer in 1970 at age 56 in near obscurity. Her story later inspired the 1982 film Frances, but even that couldn't undo decades of silence around her suffering. A journalist once wrote, "Frances wasn't crazy. She was awake in a world that demanded sleep." Do you want to continue? 11. William Haynes. William Haynes was once one of MGM's top stars, the wisecracking, charming leading man of hits like Brown of Harvard and Tell It to the Marines. He had the looks, the charisma, and the box office numbers. But he also had a secret that Hollywood couldn't forgive. He was openly gay in an era when that truth was career suicide. Haynes refused to live a lie. He stayed with his partner, Jimmy Shields, even when MGM, under Louis B. Mayer's pressure, gave him an ultimatum: end the relationship or end the contract. Haynes chose love. The studios retaliated. His roles vanished overnight. Cast out by the very system he once ruled, Haynes reinvented himself. He became a successful interior designer to the stars. His clients included Joan Crawford and George Cukor. But the spotlight never returned. He and Shields lived quietly together for nearly 50 years, enduring harassment and violence, including a brutal attack by the Ku Klux Klan. Haynes died in 1973 of lung cancer, nearly forgotten by the industry he helped shape. Hollywood barely mentioned his passing. Cary Grant once called him the bravest man I ever knew. But history buried that courage, just like it buried his name. 12. Lupe Veles. They called her the Mexican Spitfire, a whirlwind of energy, wit, and undeniable screen presence. Lupe Veles burst onto the Hollywood scene in the 1920s, becoming one of the first Latina actresses to find major success in American cinema. Films like The Gaucho and the Mexican Spitfire series made her a sensation. She was bold, defiant, and magnetic, both on screen and in the headlines. But Hollywood never let her forget she was different. She was typecast in fiery, exotic roles and boxed into stereotypes that both boosted her fame and limited her growth. Behind the glamour, Lupe battled insecurities, volatile romances, and the crushing weight of being a woman of color in a system that only tolerated her for entertainment. In 1944, at just 36, she was found dead in her Beverly Hills home. Official reports stated suicide by overdose. Rumors, many cruel and unfounded, spread for decades, turning her death into a grotesque Hollywood myth. The truth was far simpler. Lupe felt cornered, alone, and discarded by an industry that once couldn't get enough of her. Her legacy was reduced to tabloid punchlines until recent decades began to reclaim her brilliance. She was too wild for her time, a friend said, and far too human for Hollywood. 13. Dana Andrews. He was the quintessential post-war leading man, stoic, handsome, and commanding. Dana Andrews rose to prominence in the 1940s with unforgettable performances in Laura, The Best Years of Our Lives, and A Walk in the Sun. For a time, his name was synonymous with American masculinity, strong, tortured, and quietly heroic. But fame is a fragile currency. Dana battled alcoholism in silence, even at the height of his career. As the roles got darker, so did his reality. His drinking, once hidden, became impossible to ignore. Directors stopped calling. Contracts dissolved. And the man once poised to be the next Gary Cooper found himself floating in television bit parts and forgotten B-movies. Though he eventually sobered up and became an advocate for alcoholism awareness, the industry never welcomed him back. He lived quietly in California, relying on family and fading royalties. Dana Andrews died of pneumonia and heart failure in 1992 after years of battling Alzheimer's disease. His funeral was modest. Few headlines marked his passing. One of his last interviews ended with a quiet line. "I knew how to pretend on screen, but life never gave me a script." 14. In the golden days of silent cinema, Lila Lee was the sweetheart of Paramount. Her delicate features and wholesome charm made her a fan favorite, starring alongside legends like Rudolph Valentino in Blood and Sand and holding her own in dozens of features throughout the 1920s. She was poised to transition into the sound era seamlessly. But behind the doll-like face was a life riddled with heartbreak. She suffered from recurring health issues, a string of unstable marriages, and severe bouts of depression. Her name became entangled in scandals, one involving her lover's mysterious death in 1936, which tabloids devoured without mercy. The studio distanced itself. Roles disappeared. Lila, once revered, was now regarded as unstable and dangerous. She lived the rest of her life in obscurity, surviving on Social Security and small residuals, that moving between modest apartments and assisted living. When she died in 1973 from a stroke, no major outlet covered her death. Hollywood had moved on decades earlier. A film historian once remarked, Lila Lee was everything Hollywood claimed to cherish, until she became inconvenient. Thomas Inn. He was one of the founding fathers of Hollywood, director, producer, and studio mogul. Thomas Ince helped revolutionize the studio system in the 1980s, building Inceville, the first major movie production facility in California. He worked with legends like Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. At one point, his name was as powerful as any mogul in the business. But Thomas Ince is remembered not for how he lived, but how he died. In 1924, he mysteriously died after a yacht party hosted by newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst. Officially, it was reported as heart failure. But rumors swirled that Hearst, in a jealous rage, shot Ince by mistake, intending to kill Charlie Chaplin, whom he suspected of having an affair with Hearst's mistress, Marion Davies. The truth was buried. Witnesses were silenced. No investigation ever followed. Ince's body was cremated almost immediately, and the scandal faded under Hearst's immense media power. Hollywood moved on. Thomas Ince, once a titan, was reduced to a footnote in a ghost story. His pioneering work was overshadowed by a mystery never solved. A Hollywood columnist once wrote, "He built the Dream Factory and may have died for being in the wrong scene." 16. Thelma Todd. Known as the Ice Cream Blonde, Thelma Todd was a shining star of early comedy cinema. She held her own alongside the Marx Brothers and Laurel and Hardy, bringing beauty and brains to a genre that often left women as background decoration. By the early 1930s, she had appeared in over 100 films and opened her own successful cafe in Pacific Palisades. But success didn't shield her from danger. Thelma became entangled with shady figures, rumored mob ties, a controlling ex, and whispers of blackmail. In December 1935, she was found dead in her car inside a garage above her cafe. Carbon monoxide poisoning, the coroner said. An accident or suicide? But blood on her face, the absence of soot in her lungs, and conflicting timelines told a murkier story. Rumors of murder ignited Hollywood gossip columns. Some claimed she had been silenced. Others insisted she knew too much about illicit dealings in Tinseltown's underworld. Yet despite the speculation, no one was ever charged. Her case was closed quickly, and her memory faded. At just 29, Thelma Todd became another unsolved tragedy swept under Hollywood's gilded rug. She was too smart, too bold, and too beautiful, a friend said, and that scared more men than it should have. 17. George Reeves. To a generation of children in the 1950s, George Reeves was Superman. As the star of Adventures of Superman, his square, gentle eyes and cape made him a symbol of American strength and morality. Off-screen, he was warm, charismatic, and deeply frustrated. The very role that made him famous also trapped him. Typecast and dismissed by studios, Reeves found it nearly impossible to land serious roles after Superman. He turned to the bottle, clashed with his agents, and became entangled in a toxic relationship with Toni Mannix, the wife of MGM executive Eddie Mannix, a man rumored to have deep underworld connections. On June 16, 1959, George Reeves was found dead in his bedroom from a gunshot wound to the head. It was ruled a suicide, but the details never added up. No fingerprints on the gun, mysterious bruises, witnesses reporting strange noises, theories of murder, mob retribution, or even a cover-up flooded tabloids. He was just 45. Despite his fame, Reeves died disillusioned and isolated, abandoned by the very system that built him. At his funeral, few Hollywood elites appeared. He played a man who could fly, one reporter wrote, but no one noticed when he fell.